This episode of the George Poulos Podcast is brought to you by George Poulos merch, and this one comes with a little bit of a cool story. So I just re-released the I Am Nobody t-shirt. It says, I am nobody, therefore I can be anybody. This is a line that I wrote when I was starting to have my spiritual awakening, and this sentiment that I am nobody, or in other words, I am not my ego, absolutely set me free. Absolutely allowed me to expand my wings and fly, right? When I dropped this narrow idea of who I thought I was and who I had to be, suddenly I felt this surge of freedom, and it started manifesting in my creativity, in my career, and my relationships, in all aspects of life. And I was really excited to put this on a shirt, and I actually had released it in the past, but something happened where I went through a period of doubt. And I started to feel like, oh, this message is maybe a little too spiritual. Maybe I should do something more generic, more pleasing to everybody. And I followed this doubt and I removed the shirt from my store. And then just the other day, I actually went to a Marianne Williamson event. I got to meet her at the end of the event. And she complimented the shirt. She read the quote out loud. And she was like, wow, that's a cool shirt. And I felt like, oh, shit, maybe it's actually a cool shirt. And then on our way out, the security guard stopped me. He was like, wow, I love your shirt. I got to take a picture of that. And he was resonating with the message. And I was like, first of all, clear signs from the universe that I should put this shirt back on my merch store. So I did, georgepoulos.com/store. But I was also like, wow, I just saw myself falling back into a limiting belief that I need to subdue myself and subdue my truth in order to be pleasing to others, right? Just right back into people pleasing. But then these responses from people made me realize, no, I need to press into the truth. I need to drop all limiting beliefs and move forward, right? And relentlessly pursue my truth. Right? I'm done with suppressing myself in order to be pleasing to society or whoever, right? So anyways, I thought that just like felt like a profound like confirmation from the universe that no, you don't need to subdue your message. And not only that, people are ready to hear this, right? And I like the idea, like particularly with the security guard, I could tell that the message brightened his day. He took a photo of it. He took it with him, right? That's going to potentially reverberate, right? So I really like the idea of like my shirts being these messages out there in the universe for other people to catch on to. So the I Am Nobody t-shirt is now in stock again at georgepoulos.com/store. Thank you for the support. Now let's get into the episode. All right, welcome back to the George Poulos Podcast. This is going to be a unique episode because my girlfriend is in the room. And immediately when I started speaking to record this episode, I became conscious of her presence. And then the next thought was, I need to make sure I don't sound stupid. Something along those lines. Which shows us we have more work to do to be able to really be ourselves together. But I also feel like I'm ready for this. And I feel like I even went through this with just recording this podcast in general. I remember towards the beginning, I was so fearful to like really just speak and to really just be myself. But as I've practiced and gotten more comfortable, sitting down right here with the camera right there has become a sacred place where it's actually easy for me to sink into myself. This has become one of the easiest places, one of the places where I have the best access to who I am authentically, truly, without any filters. I almost feel like as I go about my day, there's more filtering that needs to be done and more mask wearing. You know, when I go out there, I'm not fully being myself all the time. Even around friends that I've known for years, there's a lot of subduing of my weirdness and my craziness, and it's been really cool to watch this unfold on the podcast. And in a way, it's like, for me, the podcast has been a training program in being myself. And the more myself I am on this podcast, in my creativity, the easier it gets to just purely be myself out there, right? It's the same way that the morning pages are a training program in expressing your true creativity, right? You open your journal, you write freely, you drop all the rules that you're usually carrying around, like, oh, this writing has to be good, I need to write the right things. You drop everything and just let your hand move across the page, just let it come out. The better you get at letting go while you're writing the morning pages, the better you get at letting go in all aspects of your creativity. And you just become a channel. Like, literally, your ego is a blockade for your creativity. And it parallels real life out there as well. Like, the more you can practice letting go in your morning pages, the more I practice letting go on this podcast, the easier it is for me to let go out there, right? To let go of these ideas that I need. To let go of these ideas that I need a particular kind of job, a particular kind of relationship. The more I let go, the more the universe takes care of me, the better my life turns out, right? The ego and the calculations of who we think we're supposed to be only gets in the way of that truth and that true power that we all have within us. We're literally born out of the universe. And society has taught us that we need to be something other than we are. That's what letting go is. Letting go is letting go of what society told you have to be, right? And you've unconsciously taken society's beliefs, and you're always walking around thinking that you have to be something other than who you are, right? But when you let go, you just let yourself be who you are. And then everything happens without effort. When you stop calculating what job should I get, what relationship should I be in, how do I do this and that and this, how do I make sure everything goes according to society's rules, when you drop all of that, your authentic being just takes over. And when you are in your authenticity, no effort is required to do anything. You can accomplish tremendous feats with absolutely no effort, because you're just being who you are. Being who you are is an effortless thing. I guess I'm doing a pretty good job with Julia in the room. I've been reading, I haven't done a reading update in a while. I've been reading Joy by OSHO, and a lot of what I just said is like, I'm basically channeling OSHO. This has been, I've said it probably 100 times that Intimacy by OSHO is one of my favorite OSHO books. That's still true. That's about letting go when it comes to love, dropping all the rules, dropping all the expectations, absolutely 100% being your true self when it comes to love and relationships. That's what Osho talks about in that book. That book cracked my heart open. It opened me. It's absolutely changed my life. Creativity by Osho is another one that really cracked me open, where, all the spiritual journey is crazy, because it's not that you need to figure out love. It's not that you need to figure out creativity. It's not that you need to figure out career. It's that when you figure out the truth of the matter, all aspects of life, they click. And it's because in all aspects of life, we were conditioned into carrying these expectations and beliefs that we have to be a certain way. In every aspect, creativity, work, friendships, relationships. And the whole thing is that you need to drop everything you've been taught, look within, find where you've been taught these things, figure out for yourself, do these conditioned beliefs have any basis? And eventually you figure out, if you do enough internal searching, that what you've been taught is completely baseless, and then you start from scratch and you figure these things out on your own, right? Disregarding all of the rules you've been taught, and you start to make your own rules. That's what Osho has done a great job of clicking into my head, and he's really cracked me open in that way. And Joy is up there in my favorite Osho books. It's just been really beautiful. I mean, there's something that happens on the spiritual journey where you'll have periods where you lose your faith and you'll start to wonder if you're crazy and maybe everyone else is right. Maybe I do need to get that 9-to-5 job. Maybe I do need to be in that normal relationship and follow all the traditional rules, right? I call these periods where you're losing your faith in your spiritual journey, where you're losing faith in the truth, where you're losing faith in love, where you're subscribing to fear again, right? Reading Osho always puts me right back there. I'm like, oh, wait, no, I'm not alone. I am figuring something out. I did a whole episode addressing like Wild Wild Country and Osho's controversies. I just watched the last episode of Wild Wild Country again, and I'm like, it's funny talking about this film to people. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's a cult. Like, he's a cult leader. He's evil. And when I made that Osho episode, I was like scared that I was going to get canceled if I like defend Osho. But really, I watched that last episode again, and it's really sad the way that Osho is treated. I mean, if you read his words, it's hard to say that he did not know the truth. Like, it just springing from what his words have done to me, it's like they have profoundly impacted my life and helped me let go of all those expectations and rules that I mentioned that I was conditioned into believing. That Osho has helped me shift from a reliance on the external to a reliance on the internal, right? He's helped me prioritize my inner blossoming above all else, above what anyone thinks, right? When you're on a spiritual journey like this, a lot of people around you who are subscribed to the system, to the ways of society and culture, when you tell them what you're going through, they'll have fear in their eyes. They'll be worried about you. They'll express their doubts and their concerns about what you're doing and what you're learning. And as people who were conditioned so deeply in childhood to believe in the ways of society, when everyone around us is like doubting us, we can slip back into that. We can question ourselves. But the main thing is that the faith should be inner. It should come from your own inner experience. Yeah, and I don't think I finished that point about Osho. It's like, I don't know, man. I feel like he understood something. I feel like he was an enlightened being, and I feel like he really tried. He really tried to actually change something. And there's like this this way that we've been like, it's almost like we all know that this that our way of life is like a little bit off. Like something's off in the way we're living right now. But whenever someone tries to change it, it's like there's almost like this collective energy to suppress it and keep things the way they are. And when you actually go within, right? Osho is a big proponent of like, don't get too wrapped up in the external, right? Like the political system out there, it's not going to fix your problems. We all have the ability to go within and find 100% content and fulfillment no matter what is going on externally. And the external is going to go on changing and being crazy and being chaotic. So we got to first prioritize the inner journey. when you prioritize that inner journey enough and you find wholeness within yourself, you start to see how this fear-based system perpetuates itself. And, the response I see to OSHO and Wild Wild Country feels like a symptom of that, of how the system perpetuates itself, right? It's a fear-based system and it perpetuates itself. And one of the ways that it does that is it spins a narrative of an enlightened being who tried to change the world, right? So that everyone just dismisses him, right? Yeah, this man has changed my life. Seriously. And it clicked. How it really clicked was love, right? Because I happen to, for whatever reason, sitting here today, I have been in countless relationships. Romantic relationships have been an obsession of mine. They've kind of been the way that I seek fulfillment. And I've been through so many of them, so many long-term relationships, all of which followed to a T how a relationship is supposed to be, right? How we were taught a relationship is supposed to be, according to society, monogamous, making sure you're fulfilling each other's needs, all these things, right? Hit all the check boxes, but I was not happy in these relationships. And I was fucking confused, man. And that reminds me of how I also found success in my career, right? I talk about this a lot, my skateboarding YouTuber career, right? I found success. I was thriving financially. I was popular. I was successful. I hit all the check boxes of success, but I was not happy. It's like what we're told will make us happy is just not on the mark, right? It's just not on the mark, and you have to shift it. You have to ignore the check boxes. If you do these things in your relationship, you'll be happy. If you do these things in your career, you'll be happy. If you hit all these check boxes for all these aspects of life, you'll be happy. That's just not, I went there, I hit all the check boxes. I found over and over and over again that I'm still not happy. And the reason why is because those check boxes are completely arbitrary. They're based on traditions, beliefs, whatever, that don't line up with my inner being. So you have to go inside and you have to have the courage to do it the way you want to do it. And what the well-meaning doubters don't understand, the people who look from the outside of someone having a spiritual journey, they don't understand that when you give these things up, you go from superficial fulfillment, superficial success, to actually a real deep, grounded sense of success and fulfillment. How did this all come out? I don't even know. I feel like just a minute ago, I was nervous to even start. So Joy has been a great read. I also wanted to share an experience, which I may have actually mentioned in the sponsor at the beginning, but I'll say it again. So one of the books I read recently was A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. I picked up this book after I found her on TikTok. It was just a TikTok sound of her. Then I found out she was running for president. Then I ordered the book. I read the book. Basically when I read a book, I immediately know that either this book is pointing towards the truth, or this book is pointing towards the truth, but it's not quite in the language that I prefer, or this is an ego trip for the author, right? A Return to Love, immediately, this book points towards the truth. I would say it contains the truth, but truth is only lived as experience, right? So every book in my shelf None of these books are the truth, but they point towards the truth, which if you take their guidance, you can end up living the truth as experience, feeling the truth for yourself. Right? So A Return to Love was a beautiful one. And particularly, I did this episode about health anxiety. And this book contained a spiritual perspective on health predicaments that absolutely changed my life. Right? So I had a profound breakthrough and awakening from this book. Particularly, I had a medical condition, and I immediately jumped into a victim-based mindset. And then as I Googled things, I just saw more and more fear, more and more pessimism. People saying like, this is not going to heal, you need surgery, this sort of energy. And I bought into it, and I went all the way into this fear. And this book brought me out of it, helped me realize, I cannot fall into a victim mindset, right? That's gonna make it worse. If I'm sitting here believing that I'm a victim, this is not gonna get better, right? This book helped me shift to a healing mindset. I'm healing. I'm doing what I need to do to heal. I'm getting better. And I actually miraculously got better. From something that is not supposed to get better, scientifically speaking, right? So I had this profound experience from the Marianne Williamson book. And then by similar synchronicity, a friend told me she was speaking in New York City. I went to the event. Pretty fiery political event. I'm not sure how I feel about getting too involved in politics, right? Because politics is a crazy game, right? And I like what OSHO says, that true freedom is not political. True freedom is inner, right? So as 2024 rolls around, I'm going to be still prioritizing the inner journey, not focusing too much on the political energy, which has a real fighting energy, a real aggressive energy. I remember 2020 just like really being tapped into that news cycle, and it's just like basically constantly being in a state of fight or flight and feeling worked up about the election, when really much of that is not in my control, right? So this time around, I'll be following my intuition, right? My intuition, I'm going to be voting for Marianne for sure. And that's an intuitive read, and there's not much else beyond that. The event in New York had this like, it was both beautiful, and it had this like fiery political energy that was kind of cool in a way, cool and exciting. But I also see how politics just brings out the fight in people. Like it brings out people's, how I talk about people who leave hate comments on like my Instagram. They're just like dumping out some ego thing, right? Like they're in a place where they feel threatened by something a random person is saying on the internet, and to assert their ego, they need to say something hateful or judgmental, right? That happened during the political event. Two hecklers had an outburst, and I was like, wow, these people are really angry, and they are totally reactive, right? Like totally unconscious, just yelling something incoherent in order to get some ego hit. Just really interesting. Anyways, I met Marianne, got a photo, and it was pretty cool. And that's when she complimented the shirt. And that made it click for me that this fear I had about the message on my shirt, I was like, the shirt came out in a surge of confidence, right? It was a spontaneous creative output with a message I believed in. And then over time, I got scared that message was too niche. People wouldn't understand it. Nobody's going to buy that shirt. Right? That's kind of the societal brainwashing I'm talking about. That I subscribe to all the time. It's like all of these things are the same, right? This fear that, oh, this shirt is too spiritual. Nobody's going to get it. No, everyone's going to be too scared to wear that. It's not the right message. It needs to be more generic and palatable and pleasing to the society, right? It's the same thing as feeling like if you're starting to become an artist, maybe you're making some crazy art, you could cut yourself off from who you need to be because you're trying to be pleasing to society, you know? Yeah. And it's interesting, I even still feel it speaking on this podcast. I'm like, oh, is what I just said too extreme? Is what I just said going to get me canceled? Is what I just said going to make people uncomfortable, right? That's the same thing. It's the same thing. I'm still holding on to some sort of ego calculation of what words can I say that will be pleasing to everybody, right? All of that has to be dropped. And you can see I'm still on the journey. I especially deal with this, not less so when I'm sitting down and speaking, but when I'm editing the podcast and I'm like reviewing what I said, like sometimes that ego voice comes in and I'm like, whoa, man, you sound a little crazy. Maybe you should cut this part out of the podcast. Even though it came out in a moment of spontaneous, genuine, creative energy. Do you know what I mean? So every time that ego calculated voice comes in that tries to limit yourself, that's something to be very watchful of, because you're siphoning yourself off from making your dreams come true, making your destiny come true. You're cutting yourself off from your true authenticity, from being yourself. That's where fulfillment lies, right? All this shit I'm saying, all of these words, this is very wordy, right? It's a podcast. This is one of my ways into the truth, is to be very wordy, right? But then you have philosophies like Zen Buddhism, right? Where the whole thing, everything I'm saying can be encapsulated in just be here now in the present. There's nothing else. Be here now in the present. When you're here in the present, everything I'm saying automatically falls into place. You don't need the intellectualization. You don't need the intellectual understanding. If you can get to where this moment is it's impossible to make a calculation and to prevent yourself from being yourself. If this moment is it, you are yourself. You are, right? There's nothing else. So just keep that in mind, it's tempting to get really intellectual and to try to understand, and it's because we have Western brains and that's how we're wired, or conditioned rather. But you can take all of this and just get yourself to collapse into the present. I don't know if I share this one, but this keeps happening when I'm brushing my teeth for some reason, where, right, like I'm living in my mind a lot. Like I think I'm pretty deep on my spiritual journey. Like I'm aware that I'm in my mind a lot. That's a huge step from just being wrapped up into my mind. But like most of the time throughout my day, I've got thoughts racing like this. And what's right in front of me is very clouded by those thoughts. This keeps happening to me when I'm brushing my teeth, where I'll take the toothbrush out of my mouth and look at it, and all the thoughts stop. And suddenly I'm just looking at my toothbrush and it's so clear and it's so quiet. It's almost like pure silence. And it's like, wow. When you feel that, you really understand how the way you usually operate is heavily clouded by racing thoughts. And we can't slip into being disappointed that we have all these racing thoughts. The main thing is be aware of what's happening. Don't be wrapped up. Try not to be wrapped up in the racing thoughts. Don't get caught on each racing thought and going over there and going over there. If you're here, there's racing thoughts. That's what I'm aware of. Right? I am not those thoughts. There's a sound of a motorcycle turning on. The breeze is coming in. It's interesting, this podcast is largely where I indulge in many of these thoughts. And because of what I focus on and pay attention to, so many of these thoughts have to do with awakening, right? But awakening in its raw form is an experience within. Right? It's not an intellectual understanding of awakening, but that is a method that can help us get there. I guess this would be a good thing to talk about, because I've shared a little bit about my alcohol journey on this podcast. I knew this was going to happen eventually, that alcohol would just slip away from my life. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm sober now, because I probably will end up drinking again. But last weekend, for the first time in my life, so I had the acid trip in late December, and for about 3 weeks after that, alcohol just dropped away from my life, because the acid put me so in tune to myself that I didn't need a substance to change anything. Everything was perfect, right? But then slowly, I went back to my conditioned ways. I started feeling like I needed alcohol again in order to socialize, in order to acclimate to certain social situations, right? So then I got back onto drinking. And I wasn't worried about it. I just allowed it to happen, Remember, there are no problems. There's I could see how over-identifying with the problem, right? We're all on individual journeys, so filter this through your intuitive heart. But for me, if I started to feel like, I have a problem with alcohol, I need to quit, that would just almost make it worse. Instead, my way has been to just observe when I'm grabbing a beer. What are the circumstances that are resulting in me wanting to grab a beer? How am I drinking the beer? How many beers am I drinking? Why? What does it do? How does it feel? Right? Just noticing. So I noticed the alcohol fall away after the acid trip. I noticed it start to come back, and it started to come back in tandem with me just starting to be more anxious again, this whole thing about losing faith. This am I crazy? Should I go back to being a little bit more normal? Am I being like a crazy psychedelic hippie? These sorts of doubts started to creep in. Coinciding with that, I started picking up the beers again, right? But I kind of had an inkling that eventually, right, when I learned something on a psychedelic, it's not going anywhere, right? There might be a period of losing faith, but that lesson is deep inside my core. Anyways, last weekend, I found, without intention, I didn't write down, I'm going to be sober this weekend. There was no intention. I just felt like grabbing a box of seltzer waters. And I grabbed a box of them, and I had some social events over the weekend, and I just ended up bringing some seltzers instead of beer, and I had a fucking great time. And really interesting observations. First of all, just holding a can and doing the act of drinking, that gets me 50%, if not more, of the feeling of being drunk. Just doing this. Since this action is so tied to my brain of like socializing and letting loose, it doesn't matter what's in the can. Just having that comfort got me feeling almost drunk at these social events I was at. And then, okay, so yeah, and here's something that psychedelics have really helped me understand. And a language note. Psychedelics don't really teach us anything. All they do is show us what we already know, right? So when people make content online about like, oh, this is something I learned from mushrooms. No, the mushrooms just showed you the truth. And that truth doesn't have to go away when you're not using psychedelics, right? So something that psychedelics showed me about myself is that I don't need a substance ever at all. Substances can help me be myself. That's why they feel so good. There's nothing inherent about the substance that feels good. The substance makes you feel good because it shows you how good life can be if you just fucking let it go. Let go of the rules, let go of the expectations, let go of the constant self-analysis. If you just fucking get present, life is very, very beautiful. That's why substances feel so good. There's nothing inherent about the alcohol that feels good. It feels good because it's allowing you, it's a chemical solution that allows you to fucking let go and be a human. What we're after here on the spiritual journey is a permanent allowance of being a human. It is a permanent state of being ourselves, dropping all the calculations at all times, being ourselves always, right? As nature intended. Right, so sipping this seltzer water at the party, I gave myself a little brain hack. I gave myself a little permission to start just being myself and dropping the fucking insecurity, right? So in a way, I did get drunk. But in that case, drunk just means I gave myself permission to be myself. So then I started feeling good. Because remember that where I'm coming to is the understanding that we don't need to try to do anything. You show up to a party, you don't need to try to be social. Your inner being knows exactly how to handle a social situation. You don't have to try to do anything. Right? So all the alcohol is doing is removing your incessant need to calculate and to make sure you're doing and saying the right things, right? It's this, again, it's all parallel. It's the same thing as what job am I going to get? Let go of the incessant calculating of what you're supposed to be doing. If you get rid of that layer, your true self comes out. And it's the easiest thing in the world, right? So why is alcohol slowly, and I'm not saying permanently yet, why is alcohol slowly just falling out of my life? It's because I'm understanding the whole mechanism, right? I've looked at it and observed it enough, and I see that it's just helping me. The alcohol just helps me get rid of that layer. But I have the power to get rid of that layer myself, and all I have to do is get here. Then the layer's gone. And then here's an interesting one. Sometimes you're supposed to leave the party. Sometimes it's not the party for you. Sometimes alcohol is a mechanism that, this is actually kind of an important one to understand. Alcohol can be a dangerous mechanism used to override and suppress your intuition, right? Because the reason you might not be vibing in that party is because your intuition is like, yo, fuck this. But you use enough alcohol, it can also be used in a way to suppress your intuition, and you force yourself to enjoy that party that you're not supposed to be at, right? It's not doing anything for you. So this is really interesting, right? And for the first time, I had this vision of a life without alcohol. And it feels like, right, like I understand why Alcoholics Anonymous has a spiritual bend to it. I'm starting to see something and feel something here. I have this vision of a life without alcohol where I'm holding a seltzer at all the parties. And what I feel when I have that vision is a life that is more intuitive, a life that is more aligned, because I don't need to use alcohol to force myself to enjoy anything that is not meant for me, right? There's so much more of a trust inside that if a party doesn't feel like it's meant for me, I just trust that and move on. And again, with every example I share, right? With the skateboarding YouTube channel, the creativity, the relationships, the alcohol journey, every lesson is not an isolated lesson. This is not an isolated lesson about leaving a party if your intuition is telling you to leave. This is about following your intuition, period. This is about leaving a job that your intuition is telling you to leave. This is about, look, it would be, in my view, one of the worst tragedies to spend your whole life forcing yourself to do shit you don't want to do, right? That's one of the worst tragedies that could possibly happen to you. So it's not about only staying at parties you like. It's about dropping all the rules that have gotten you into bullshit that you don't care about. It's about finding yourself again and not creating the life you want, just letting go enough so that the life you want just falls into place, because it doesn't really require that much effort. Right? Like what I feel recording this podcast, like I cannot even describe it to you. Like when I recorded skate videos back in the day, there was like a 1 to 2 year period where every video was a slog. Every video was an effort. It drained my energy. You know, I kind of dreaded it. When I went to sleep the night before filming a skate video, I couldn't really sleep that well. I was stressed and anxious. And I was relieved when I was done making those skate videos, right? There was so much effort, and it was working, right? Like it brought me somewhere. Money was still coming in, but it was so effortful. It was such a fight, right? That's the danger of ambition. You feel like you need to try so hard. What I feel recording this podcast, for example, I am mind blown to say this and feel this and truly speak it from my heart, but I am not trying. Like, it's literally just happening. I say this all the time, but a lot of the times when I sit here and record, I feel like it's not me, right? I don't feel like it's me sitting here saying this stuff. There are no calculations going into the words I'm saying. This particular episode, nothing written at all. No notes app, nothing. Just, I was even sitting here at the beginning, kind of on a wavelength that I picked up from A Return to Love. I was saying, you know what? Whatever the universe wants to come out will come out. And if the universe wants me to scan my notes app for questions, then that's what will happen, right? I just gave up control. But during the skate channel, I was fighting. Every video I was fighting to make sure everything was good and proper and that it was going to get me to the next level. Now I've given up. I mentioned this in the last episode. I've given up. People are scared to give up because they think that things are going to stop happening. The way I see it, when you give up, you finally allow your true self to take over. And being your true self is the easiest thing in the world. You don't have to do anything because you already are. All right. Normally, I like to do a Q&A in these episodes, but that's what the universe had to tell me to tell you today. Feeling drained and just going to trust that. So please keep your questions coming in, though. They are really absolutely guiding this podcast, which I consider to be a collective inquiry into the truth. So we're all going on this journey together. I'm really grateful to have you all here. Please keep the questions coming. You guys are asking really beautiful, insightful questions about the inner journey that I'm grateful for. They're helping me figure out my beliefs about certain things, and this is just a very beautiful collective process. Godspeed to everyone on their journeys forward. I will see you next week. Namaste. Don't forget to check out the merch store at georgepoulos.com/store. Thanks for the support. Peace.